The 1500s to the 20th century were an era of colonial expansion, when the nations of Europe dominated much of the world. This domination was achieved primarily through their naval technology, which saw great powers like Spain, France and especially Britain outpace the rest of the world with ships of wood and sail and later powered by steel and steam. The British Royal Navy, being the world's supreme power, was confirmed after the legendary Battle of Trafalgar in 1805. That was until the rise of the German Empire some 70 years later. Kaiser Wilhelm II sought to rebalance Europe, giving a speech in Hamburg on June 18th of 1897, in which he remarked that the British Navy is strong enough to defy any hostile combination. Germany has, practically speaking, no navy. Before everything else, I must provide myself with a navy. In 20 years' time, when the navy is ready, I shall speak a very different language. Welcome to our video on the naval arms race between Germany and Britain in the lead-up to the World Wars, in which the rising star of Central Europe challenged the traditional juggernaut of the seas, while the Royal Navy fought to retain its supremacy. Do you know why thousands of people on YouTube and Patreon support us financially? Because they get history you won't find anywhere else. We release 3 new exclusive videos every week. Plus, they get perks like early access to all videos, voting rights on upcoming series and videos, access to our private Discord, our production schedule, and much more. Right now, 250 exclusive episodes are waiting for members and patrons, including from our series on the Eastern Front of World War II, Spanish War of Succession, the Punic Wars, the Pacific War, the Iberian Reconquista, the Russian Revolution and Civil War, the North African and Italian campaigns of World War II, Sicilian Wars between the Greeks and Carthaginians, and many others. By joining, you're not only unlocking rare content, you're also supporting the stories you love. Your help allows us to keep producing 3 free videos per week while paying our team competitive salaries and growing the channel. Join via the links in the description, the pinned comment, or by pressing the join button under the video. Thanks for making this possible. The second half of the 19th century was a time of rapid change in the technology of the warship, in which sail-powered wooden vessels began being phased out in favour of steam-powered ships with hulls of metal. In 1859, Britain laid down her first ironclad warships, the HMS Warrior and Black Prince. Naval gunnery from 1859 to 1892 saw a gradual increase in the caliber size of onboard firepower, allocating for greater range, as cannon broadsides were replaced with rotating turrets or barbettes, while muzzle-loading rifles in the hands of shipboard marines gave way to the more efficient breech-loading rifle. By the 1870s, wooden ships of the line disappeared, as plate armour was outfitted to them, but the substantial weight cost them speed, manoeuvrability and range. At first, the British were reluctant to relinquish their sails and masts for engines, for steam engines were prone to failure, and coal stocks were not yet globally abundant. Later, engineers began designing long hulls with narrow beams, and by 1892, naval architects settled on a length-to-width ratio of 5:1. That year, Britain settled on a balance of power, protection and propulsion, requiring 14,000 tons of displacement for a new type of ship, the HMS Royal Sovereign, designated as a pre-dreadnought. Another major development had occurred back in 1890, when Alfred Thayer Mahan, an American naval officer and historian, published The Influence of Sea Power Upon History. Mahan asserted that sea power was the key factor that enabled strong nations to prosper and exert their influence over weaker ones, advocating that the best way to achieve naval supremacy was through large-scale fleet battles. Mahan's book became deeply influential and made its way into military academies around the world. Consequently, what became known as the Mahan Doctrine deeply influenced navies across the globe. Despite a minor Anglo-French naval arms race in the late 19th century, British maritime supremacy remained relatively unchallenged in the decades after the Napoleonic Wars. That was until the divided states of Germany united into a single nation in 1871. Chancellor Otto von Bismarck had masterfully forged Germany's foreign relations so as not to be attached to any other European power. This all changed when a young Kaiser Wilhelm II took the German throne in 1888 and sacked Bismarck, as his advisors believed the great diplomat would overshadow him. Wilhelm held great ambitions to elevate Germany to the status of a world power. Wilhelm broke with Bismarck's vision and drew Germany deeper into a triple alliance with Italy and Austria-Hungary, while simultaneously not renewing the reinsurance treaty with Russia, prompting her to gradually ally with France. Wilhelm and his advisors had done this due to the belief that it would improve Anglo-German relations. After reading Mahan's work in 1894, Wilhelm began pursuing a policy of providing Germany with a navy that could match her growing status. By 1895, Wilhelm pressured the Reichstag to fund the construction of 2 pre-dreadnoughts, but only received funding for 4 of the 36 cruisers he sought. Frustrated, Wilhelm recalled Rear Admiral Alfred von Tirpitz of the Imperial German Navy from the Far East in June 1897 to lead the Imperial Naval Office. A staunch advocate of Mahan's doctrine, Tirpitz insisted Germany must build a fleet capable of offensive naval battles to secure global influence. In his first meeting with the Kaiser, Tirpitz proposed his Risikogedanke, or risk theory. He argued that by building a fleet 2/3 the size of Britain's and narrowing their battleship advantage to no more than 50%, Germany could exploit the Royal Navy's global dispersal. If Germany's navy reached a strength where Britain could not defeat it without crippling losses, Tirpitz believed Britain would be forced to negotiate with Germany as an equal, potentially abandoning its splendid isolation policy to join the Triple Alliance. To realize this vision, Wilhelm and Tirpitz pursued 5 naval laws. However, Britain was an island nation whose economy was dependent on her ability to import and export goods via the sea. Likewise, according to one source, by 1900, 58% of the caloric intake of the average British citizen came from overseas. Prior to the German naval challenge, British political and military leaders contemplated the potentially disastrous economic, social and political ramifications if the Royal Navy failed to ensure Britain's freedom of action. Concerns over Britain's capacity to defend itself became central to the invasion literature genre, significantly influencing public opinion. This led Britain to enact the Naval Defence Act of 1889, whereupon she formally adopted her two-power standard, mandating that Britain's Royal Navy match the next 2 largest fleets combined. Tirpitz's naval build-up scheme and Wilhelm's incoherent foreign policies began threatening Britain, resulting in a naval arms race. Germany's first Naval Act of 1898 set an annual construction target of 3 battleships, 1 cruiser, 6 light cruisers and 6 torpedo boats. Between 1901 and 1906, this legislation authorized 5 pre-dreadnoughts and 5 armored cruisers. These later pre-dreadnoughts featured 11-inch quick-firing turret guns and upgraded 6.7-inch secondary batteries, marking a significant step in naval firepower. Despite these advancements, the British Admiralty took little notice, continuing to focus instead on the naval build-up of France and Russia. During the Second Boer War, British cruisers seized 3 German mail steamers off southern Africa, provoking public outrage in Germany. This incident enabled Tirpitz to persuade the Reichstag to enact a second naval law on June 14, 1900, which committed to doubling the fleet size of the Imperial German Navy from 19 to 38 battleships by 1917, and positioning Germany as the world's second strongest naval power. While Britain maintained superiority in battleships and armoured cruisers, Germany gained a significant advantage in light cruisers, ocean-going destroyers, and pioneered the development of surface torpedo vessels. In contrast, Germany's first submarine, U-1, a coastal type, was not built until 1906, due to Tirpitz's opposition to submarine warfare. By this point, the ratios between Britain and Germany stood at 51% for pre-dreadnoughts and 280% for armoured cruisers, giving Britain a 164% margin in heavy ships. The Second Naval Act had alarmed the British Admiralty, which in 1902 continued to uphold the two-power standard, but advocated for the construction of an additional 6 battleships. Britain shifted away from its splendid isolation policy by forming the Anglo-Japanese alliance, and in 1904 it signed the Entente Cordiale with France, adding Russia to the agreement in 1907, effectively encircling Germany. In 1904, Admiral Sir John Fisher became First Sea Lord and initiated a radical overhaul of the Royal Navy. He scrapped ineffective ships and limited new construction to 4 types: battleships, armoured cruisers, large fast destroyers and submarines. Fisher standardized 12-inch guns for battleships and 9.2-inch guns for armoured cruisers, with both classes powered by steam turbines. The next pre-dreadnoughts would feature 10 guns in 5 turrets, 2 wing turrets and 3 on the centerline, allowing a broadside fire of 8 guns. Armoured cruisers would carry 8 guns, with 2 amidships turrets arranged en echelon between the second and third funnels. Fisher redistributed the entire fleet to concentrate its most powerful ships against Germany. The home fleet was renamed the Channel Fleet, operating near the English Channel, while the former Channel Fleet in Gibraltar became the Atlantic Fleet. To bolster the Channel Fleet, 4 battleships were transferred from the Mediterranean and 5 from China, increasing its total to 17 battleships. The Atlantic Fleet's 8 battleships could be maneuvered north towards the British Isles or east into the Mediterranean. In the wake of the destruction of Russian sea power during the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905, and the recent diplomatic realignments, the Admiralty and the public began debating how specifically to deal with the threat of a German naval buildup. On January 1, 1907, Fisher established a new policy stating that the Royal Navy should maintain a force twice as powerful as the German Navy, positioned just hours from Germany's coasts. After analysing the results of the Battle of Tsushima, Fisher convened a committee to design a new super battleship, designated the Dreadnought. In February 1906, amid extensive publicity, the HMS Dreadnought was launched, astonishing Germany. The HMS Dreadnought featured an 11-inch thick armour belt between her lower and middle decks, with an overall armour thickness of 8 inches. The Dreadnought was the first capital ship powered by steam turbines, which were capable of 21 knots, and had a uniform main battery of 10 12-inch guns in 5 twin turrets, allowing a broadside of 8 guns. For secondary armament, she carried 27 3-inch quick-firing guns with a rate of fire of 20 rounds per minute, alongside 5 submerged 18-inch torpedo tubes capable of holding 29 torpedoes. Tirpitz was deeply troubled by the debut of the HMS Dreadnought. He recognized that Germany had no choice but to respond, despite the high costs associated with larger ships, and the need to enlarge fixed works like the Kiel Canal. It was Tirpitz's erroneous belief that Britain had made a mistake in building her new expensive dreadnoughts and armoured cruisers, and if Germany did not flinch, they would de-escalate. To that end, Tirpitz advocated for the development of German dreadnoughts, and a 35% increase over the Second Naval Act to enable the construction of 2 dreadnoughts and 1 armoured cruiser per year. However, the bill faced significant opposition due to budget constraints and the Reichstag's reluctance to raise taxes. Then, in April of 1906, the German team at the Algeciras Conference failed to break the Entente Cordiale. It seemed to many in Germany proof that Britain was working in concert with Russia and France to encircle them, and there was a fear of a preemptive strike, akin to the Battle of Copenhagen in 1807. The Russo-Japanese War likewise spread rumours that Britain's new ally, Japan, might join in a war against her. Fear gave into nationalist sentiment, and right-wing hawks, encouraged by the navy and industry, promoted escalation, while left-wing doves encouraged more peaceful foreign relations. Luckily for the Hawks, the First Moroccan Crisis in April 1906 outraged the German public, allowing Tirpitz to enact the Third Naval Law. In both nations, an evolving naval-industrial complex was emerging, using politicians and the press to promote their interests. Public enthusiasm and media coverage centered around the dramatic presentation of naval power through events such as fleet reviews and ship launches, which became theatrical displays of strength and deterrence. These exhibitions directly fueled Anglo-German hostility due to their showy nature, their connection of national identity, the sea and military might, and the unique rhetoric and choreography of rivalry they embodied. The quest for maritime supremacy became a central theme of political mobilization, public discourse, and nationalist identity politics. By May 1907, Germany's Imperial Navy Office concluded that the latest designs of foreign dreadnoughts, not only from Britain but also Japan and the United States, would require further increases in displacement and cost. To address this rise in expenditure, Tirpitz formed a Navy League to promote naval expansion within the Reichstag. On November 18, 1907, a new bill was introduced seeking to increase production to 3 battleships and 1 battle cruiser per year. The Fourth Naval Law was passed on March 27, 1908. In April 1907, Admiral Lord Charles Beresford was appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Channel Fleet and criticised Fisher's policies for neglecting the construction of adequate light cruisers and destroyers for operations along the German coast. The resulting 1908 to 1909 minimum programme included 2 dreadnoughts, 1 armoured cruiser, 6 light cruisers, and 16 destroyers. Despite including a full-size battlecruiser in Britain's 1908 to 1909 programme, the ratio of authorised dreadnoughts remained 12 to 9. When Britain slowed its construction rate in response to Germany's growth, Germany unknowingly surpassed its target of a 3:2 ratio for capital ships. By 1908, both nations faced growing criticism regarding the cost of the naval arms race. In August, King Edward VII visited Wilhelm II in Kronberg with a document outlining British concerns, but ultimately refrained from addressing naval spending, believing it would spoil a congenial mood. Tensions escalated during the Bosnian crisis, prompting Chancellor Bernhard von Bülow to question Tirpitz's strategy, which had alienated Germany diplomatically and doubled its national debt since 1900. Bülow concluded that Germany could not afford to maintain the largest army and the second largest navy in Europe. However, Tirpitz argued that too much money had already been invested in the naval arms race to abandon it now. Similarly, Britain's Liberal government demanded a reduction in naval expenditure to increase spending on social programs. By 1909, the Admiralty reported that they were failing to maintain the two-power standard, and noted that the latest German designs were significantly more powerful than the older British ships. Additionally, Austria-Hungary planned to construct 4 dreadnoughts, and Italy had just laid down its first. Alongside this, Germany's Fourth Naval Law and the British government's intelligence errors led to the British Navy Scare of 1909. Terror struck the British public, who believed Germany intended to use their navy to blockade them into tyranny. This fear led the British public to demand that their political and military leadership accelerate the naval buildup. However, the Liberal government had just proposed the People's Budget, introducing unprecedented taxes on the lands and income of Britain's wealthy, to fund new social welfare programs. To counter this, the Conservatives, the Navy League, the British arms industry, and King Edward VII pushed for 8 more dreadnoughts, under the slogan, "We want 8 and we won't wait." The House of Lords rejected the People's Budget in November 1909, and by January 1910, the Liberals lost their majority government. A compromise was met in April of 1910, seeing the People's Budget enacted alongside a commitment to mobilize whatever financial resources were necessary to remain ahead of Germany in the naval arms race, even at the expense of a constitutional crisis. The Germans could not hope to match this escalation. Raising new revenue to cover the ever-escalating costs for the naval buildup was being met with elite political opposition and public condemnation. They knew Britain was financially superior and could simply outbuild them. Moreover, the diplomatic repercussions of the naval arms race had isolated Germany and seemed to be leading to war with Britain. Both the German elites and public began advocating for Germany to refocus on land power rather than naval expansion. Despite the hysteria, the Second Moroccan Crisis of 1911 gave Tirpitz and Wilhelm II the opportunity to push for a 5th naval law, increasing production to 3 dreadnoughts, 2 light cruisers, 12 destroyers, and 17 diesel-powered overseas submarines over the next 6 years, which would achieve Tirpitz's coveted 3:2 ratio. The financial suffering and diplomatic instability led the elites and public of both nations to demand a de-escalation of the naval programs. However, in Germany, Admiral Tirpitz held a veto power that enabled him to derail any attempts at reduction. In Britain, the interest in an arms agreement stemmed from a desire to stabilize naval competition at the lowest possible level, thereby minimizing the financial burden of maintaining clear British superiority. By 1912, the government, under Chancellor Theobald von Bethmann-Hollweg, faced isolation, Russian military expansion, and a proposal for a 5th naval law that was deemed far too expensive. Thus, Hollweg pursued a Rüstungswende, or armaments turning point policy, shifting focus on the army and opening up negotiations with Lord Chancellor Viscount Richard Haldane. This led to the Haldane Mission, brokered by Ernest Cassel and Albert Ballin, where the British made 3 proposals to Germany on January 29th. If Germany allowed Britain to maintain naval superiority, Britain would not interfere with German colonial expansion and would refrain from joining any aggression against Germany. After reviewing the proposal, Hollweg and Wilhelm II agreed to curtail naval expansion, amidst intense protests from Tirpitz, on the condition that Britain would remain neutral in a war during which Germany was not perceived as the aggressor. However, Haldane's visit to Berlin proved fruitless. Wilhelm II demonstrated his characteristic diplomatic finesse by introducing Tirpitz's Naval Amendment Bill to the Reichstag just a day before Haldane's arrival. The British refused to accept the proposal for unconditional neutrality, as it would allow Germany to take calculated risks in a conflict with France and Russia, and they believed they had already secured naval superiority. After 1912, Britain laid down 9 battleships and showed no intention of slowing down their yearly programs. On March 18, 1912, Sir Winston Churchill publicly acknowledged Britain's goal to maintain a 60% margin over Germany, meaning Britain would lay down 56 dreadnoughts to Germany's 35 by 1918. Realizing Britain would not reduce its naval expansion, Tirpitz announced his acceptance of the British 60% standard before the Reichstag in February 1913. The following year, Germany shifted its focus to building submarines instead of new dreadnoughts and destroyers, effectively abandoning the naval arms race while keeping this policy secret, which prevented other powers from following suit. The naval arms race strained Anglo-German relations and contributed to a broader militarization across Europe. By the outbreak of World War I, Britain achieved a 62% margin in dreadnoughts over Germany, and dwarfed her in terms of number of ships, capital ships, servicemen, and tonnage. Ironically, while Tirpitz and Wilhelm sought a fleet in being, their numerical inferiority allowed Britain to achieve a strategic victory during the Battle of Jutland in 1916, whereupon the High Seas Fleet would sit at port until the war's end. More videos on the Great War are on the way, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our patrons and YouTube members can watch more than 200 exclusive videos. Join their ranks via the link in the description or by pressing the join button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.